Alright guys, today we're going to start our first video on doing a Junkyard VK56 swap. Now when it comes to V8s, I come from a Junkyard LS background. Sure, I grew up working on Gen 1 small blocks, but when I started to get into modifying cars, the Junkyard LS was king. But just because an engine is popular doesn't mean it's the best one out there. And the last time that you guys saw this engine, you saw us take this engine apart, and we found that these engines, which can be had for right around LS prices, only weigh about 20 pounds more than an LS, feature a far superior dual overhead cam arrangement, have forged steel, fully counterweighted crankshafts, a far superior head bolt arrangement, and the best part is you can find them in junkyards everywhere, and that begs the question, can this engine compete with the Junkyard Turbo LS? So in the next couple of videos that you will see this engine, we aim to answer that question. But first, we had to get a hold of one of these engines, so let's go to that. Alright guys, coming to you live from a Nissan VK56 in its natural habitat. We just picked up this Nissan Titan truck right here because it was actually cheaper to buy the whole truck than what a lot of people are charging for just the engine. So what we are going to do today is try to get the thing running. The previous owner said he parked it because he couldn't get it started, so we're going to try and figure out why this thing's not running and get it fired up. So let's get to work. Alright, so first thing that we discovered is I pulled the dipstick out and there is no oil in this thing. So we're going to solve that. I don't know if it has like a start permissive for like if the low oil switch is engaged or whatever. So we're going to start there. Maybe that's all that's wrong with this thing. I'm not really familiar with Nissan, so I don't know what kind of...
You don't even know how to spell Nissan.
Yeah, it's really hard to spell. But, so we're going to put some oil in this thing because we're going to have to do that either way. We kind of don't want to run this thing without oil, so let's solve that. Alright, so we're going to hook up our battery now. So let's see if there's any sparks. Yep. Few sparks. Oh, windshield wipers are on. Let's turn them off. How do you turn them off? Oh, okay. I see. All right. Off. Off. Okay. Now they're off. Try it again. Alright, should we try it? Okay, here we go. First fire. $123,070 miles. Alright, ready? Alright, doesn't have oil pressure. Yep, it's got oil pressure. Okay. This thing runs great. This thing's quiet. Wow.
That thing's smooth.
Yeah. Huh.
Can we go through burnouts?
I don't know. We can at least see if it moves, I guess. Man, we screwed up. We were supposed to draw this out a whole lot more. This wasn't supposed to...
It would have taken 3 hours to get this thing started if we wanted to compete with these other YouTube channels.
Yeah. We're supposed to crank it over, spray Marvel Mystery Oil down in the cylinders, right?
Aren't we supposed to lick the dipstick to determine what kind?
Determine the viscosity, yep.
Oh, yeah, that's...
Yeah.
I'll be dipped. Bloodstick doesn't look that bad. 78 gallons overfilled. What do we got on Earl's? Don't see any water on here. No gas, no antifreeze, definitely no water.
Well, there wasn't any oil on the dipstick, so we couldn't do that.
Well, there you go. So we
Yeah.
have one out.
Yeah. All right, let's see if it starts again.
Start number 2.
Like a dream. That's crazy. I wonder how long it's been parked.
We ready for the dyno?
Yep. Wonder how long it's been parked. I wonder if that's the last time it was run.
Probably. No doubt.
I mean, it doesn't start like it has bad gas in it. Like, it starts like a dream. And this thing's smooth.
This thing is
Yeah.
alternator works. That brake. Brake pedal goes right to the floor. Empty. Gotta wonder what people are thinking when they put all this stuff in their car. Alright, let's try this. Dun, 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 dun. Ding, 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 ding. Ooh, alternator's charging real good too. Alright, let's see what we got for lightage. We wasted an opportunity. We spent hours pretending to work on this thing. Oh, wow. It's got a bad vibration. Yeah, check this out. Oh. It won't rev up.
Maybe it's in limp mode or something?
It's because it's in neutral, maybe.
Launch control.
Okay. So we just spent 5 minutes talking without the recorder on. The brakes have a hole in it. Calvin pumped the brakes twice, and look at that smoke. And it sprayed brake fluid all over the manifold, and it started on fire, so. All right, you got the emergency brake on? Yep. Put in gear and see if it moves. See if the oh, forward. Can you stop it with the emergency brake, or are you going to have to pop it in neutral each time?
Yeah, that's going to be tough. It's not holding very good.
Okay, just be quick to put it in neutral. It has no throttle when it's in neutral.
When it's in drive.
But when it's in drive, it has nothing.
That's floored.
That's floored
I'm flooring it right now.
with the brake on, or with the e-brake on.
Floored.
It's in some kind of limp mode. So much for burnouts and donuts. That's funny. That's not a donut, son. All right, go park this thing. We got a race to get to. That's not a donut, though.
So much for taking out the LS, huh? This thing makes like 10 horsepower.
Oh. Yeah, I wonder if it's mechanical throttle or electric.
It's electric.
Dang it.
But I was floored the entire time back there. I was just floored. Just
You were having fun doing donuts.
yeah. Yep.
Turd.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Pooper.
We got a lot of work to do.
All right, we're starting to disassemble underneath the hood. We're trying to be somewhat surgical with the wiring just because I plan to reuse a lot of that. So all of these plugs and everything that connects to the engine that's important to us will probably get reused. Also, I need to know, what polarity everything is, where's our positives, grounds, and trigger wires go to. So we're starting to get the front of the engine torn apart. Then we will tear the grill out of this thing and probably remove this core support here so that we can free the VK56
From its prison.
Yeah, from its prison. So
That hurt. Yes, it is. Oh, it's the dipstick.
good. Alright, so this is what 2,000 horsepower looks like, right?
Oh, come on.
Come on. Come on. There's only like a family of mice living in the valley. It'll be fine, right?
Yeah. They will be entertained soon.
Uh-huh. Is that why they call them the mouse motor? Or is
No,
that's
a small block Chevy.
well, maybe this is the new mouse motor.
Out of a vehicle that we junked right away because it was so rusted we couldn't, it had no value.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Now, hot rodding can be boiled down to a series of problems to solve. And when you're doing a swap like this, you definitely fall into that category. So let's introduce our first problem that we need to solve with this engine, and that is the cooling system. So the cooling system on this is kind of a convoluted design. This is actually the suction side here. The thermostat is housed in this area, and there is a coolant bypass where it can just circulate coolant through the engine in order to get it to warm up. This right here is the return side going back to the radiator to cool the coolant off from the engine. And we aim to simplify this system a whole lot just because it is a little bit more complicated than what we require. Also, we have an oil cooler, or oil heater as I call it, down here. This also circulates coolant through this area. Now, your oil temps tend to be cooler than your coolant temps, at least in a race car. So in my opinion, this turns into an oil heater for a race application. We aim to delete this as well. But first, let's get into the thermostat and the cooling system up here. So with our coolant manifold pulled off of the engine, you can see that we have something that is a whole lot more simple. Basically, we have our input and our outputs from the cylinder head. And we plan to use part of the original coolant manifold. I've actually pulled this one off of another one that we have. This actually just uses an O-ring to seal into the front portion of the manifold. And what we plan to do is make a plate that bolts onto here with a elbow that goes to our inlet fitting. And then we plan to weld a part onto here, which goes to another fitting, which is our outlet. It will literally be that simple. Now, some of you might be like, well, what are you gonna do about your thermostat? Well, we plan to not run a thermostat. In my experience, the engine doesn't really need to heat up any faster. If anything, in a race application, you're trying to keep the heat out of the engine. And you can use the cooling fan in the car to help you regulate the temperature in the engine with great effectiveness. We've never had an issue with doing it that way. So this is what we are going to do to simplify the system and just get rid of some of the OEM complicated madness. Now for the oil heater, what we have here is basically a sandwich block that sandwiches in the oil filter area. We have a long bolt that goes down through the middle, which is basically the fitting for the oil filter in the center. And what we plan to do with this is we plan to just delete all of this subsystem here. And I found that Improved Racing actually sells a fitting that will bolt in place of this arrangement here. I don't think it's designed for the VK56, but it will work on the VK56. The thread that goes into the oil pan there is a M20 by 1.5, and they sell a nice low profile fitting that should work for our use case. Now, our aim with our first VK56 swap is to sort of emulate the sloppy mechanics mantra of keep it simple, only upgrade what needs to be upgraded, and just generally don't make it any more complicated than it needs to be. Now, if you guys follow the Coyote engines or the Barra engines or the Nissan RB26, you know that due to the inherent flaws with the design of the oil pump, they tend to have issues where the oil pumps will explode and cause very bad things to happen to your engine. And I quite simply don't want to deal with that at any point in my life. Now, some people will say, you can get away with the stock stuff, it'll be fine. But I don't like the idea of running that risk. And if we're going to spend the time to do all this work to swap this into a vehicle, we might as well do this one particular part right. I'm going to get further into detail with why I think the oil pump gears fail when we get this thing all torn apart. But first, we need to pull the front cover off of this engine so that we can get at the oil pump gears. So let's get to work. Wow, that's tight. Doink. Now, I've been told that there are like 15 different bolt lengths on this front cover, so I'm going to attempt to be kind of strategic with how I remove this from the front of the engine. Just to try and keep the bolts at least somewhat organized so that when I put this back on the front of the engine, we have the right bolts in the right places and I don't have to play the guess and check game 1,000 times to figure out where the heck the bolts go back in. So, wish me luck. Wrong one, doofus. Come on, don't do that. Thank you. All right, now that we have the front cover torn off of this thing, I've pulled the oil pump gears out of the pump, and I can show you guys why this pump fails. A lot of engines with this two flat style of oil pump drive will fail the oil pumps. And while this design is fine on a a factory vehicle, when you throw a turbocharger onto this engine and you start accelerating the engine speed at a lot faster rate than what you see on a factory vehicle, this design falls apart. They likely go with this design because it's cheaper to manufacture. The problem is it concentrates the load on this internal gear into two very small locations. It is concentrating all of the force in this area right here and this area right here. And also you can see that there's a very sharp corner in this area of the internal gear. And this creates a stress riser where this pump will very likely fail. On the other hand, I actually have the gears from the inside of a LS pump. You see that it has a much better drive style. There's a 6 teeth design here that the internal sprocket on the front of the engine, it basically distributes the load across these 6 points, and you're much less likely to have a failure. To further drive this home, I'm going to make an analogy to screw head design. If you guys have ever worked with screws before, you know that a flathead, slotted style screw head tends to strip out very easily. On the other hand, a Torx screw doesn't strip out super easily, and that's because it spreads the load across 6 even locations on the screw, and that is why it does so much better at not stripping out the head of the screw. The same thing applies here, except instead of stripping the screw head, you kind of explode an oil pump gear and ruin your engine. But we can deal with the shortcomings of this pretty flawed design by just upgrading to better materials. And that is where our friends over at Boundary Pump comes in. Now, full transparency, they are sponsoring this build, and I'm very happy to be working with these guys. They offer an upgraded VK56 oil pump gear set. Unfortunately, they haven't shown up in the mail yet, so I can't really show you what they look like with my hands, but we can bring up a picture and I can talk you through why the design on them is superior. So let's go to that. All right, so here is the upgraded oil pump gear for the VK56 that's offered by Boundary Pumps. Now, not only do they make these gears in a much higher quality material, they also make it with a much better design. You can see where the inner gear contacts the crankshaft. It has a rounded corner in order to eliminate the stress riser that is in this area with the stock pump gears. And they also offer these gears with an optional heat treating for high RPM usage, which they have hooked us up with for our build. So this seems like a no-brainer to me. If you're gonna do it right. All right, another problem that we need to solve is we need to get this engine to make horsepower at a higher RPM. If you guys have done any amount of research on these engines, you know that the power peak on the early engines like this one is at 4,900 RPM. And this is going to spell horrible news for our connecting rods, and a great way to tune the RPM window where the engine makes horsepower is with the intake manifold. Now, the intake manifold is also causing us issues with hood clearance, but we're going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone with this particular issue. Now, the factory intake is what you're looking at right here, and the problem with this design is it has some of the longest runners of an intake of this design that I have ever seen. They wrap all the way up over top of here, and they come almost down to around here with the intake runner. If I stick a flashlight down inside of the intake manifold, you can get a better idea of just how long these intake runners are. It's ridiculous. I threw a tape measure on the runner here just to give you guys an idea of how long the runner is just in the intake manifold, not including the intake port. And it is like 22 inches. Frankly, this gives the Holley Ultra High Ram a run for its money on intake runner length. And you can tell that they were tuning this intake manifold for a lot of low-end grunt. All right, guys, this is our solution to the problem. This is actually a readily available intake manifold for these VK56s that is available on eBay. It's a China-made sheet metal style of intake that is made to mimic what you see on the sheet metal intakes that are available for the LS. Overall, I'm very happy with the quality and design of this intake manifold. There's a few things that I would improve on this thing, but it should perform fine for what we're going for. The intake runner lengths from the intake flange to the part inside of the intake manifold is 7 inches. This is much more reasonable for what I would expect on an engine of this type, and it should help us to get the power peak much higher in the RPM range and help our connecting rods to stay inside of there and not come out the side of that. So the few things that I don't like about this intake manifold is these velocity stacks coming into the intake manifold are a little bit close to the top of the plenum. The air should have enough room to get up and into the intake runners, but I think if they were spaced a little further away from the top, it might perform better. I could be wrong. The other thing that I don't like is I don't like how the intake runner tapers down to a smaller diameter as it goes into the plenum. I would like to see this match the diameter all the way up going into the intake plenum. Ideally, it would keep the same shape of the intake runner and not go to a round design. Air doesn't like to change shape like that, especially on a 4-valve engine, but we'll make do with it. Before I ordered this thing, I was a little bit worried about the thickness of the manifold top. This is a large flat area, and I know on the LS sheet metal intakes that are very similar to this, they have issues with this blowing out when you throw a bunch of boost at them. My concerns are almost completely gone. This is made of some pretty thick stuff. If I had to guess, I would guess it's around 3/16 of an inch, which should be plenty strong. If you're going to run this thing in a super high boost application, you could install some strut rods that go from the bottom to the top. You know, just drill a hole in the top and bottom and weld a rod into the middle of this thing to help give it a little bit more support. You could also, you know, plate over the top of this with some additional sheet metal to strengthen it. You could also put a burst panel on here, you know, just to make this thing a little bit more bulletproof. But for what we're going to do with it, this intake manifold is going to be fine. Now, I'm also very impressed with the parts that come with this intake manifold. It came with a throttle cable bracket as well as a spacer here so that if you want to run an electronic throttle, you can run it really tight up against the manifold or you can space it out. You need a little extra space for the cable throttle, and it has a bracket that comes with it that's already set up for your typical truck or car, you know, cable style GM cable connections that go for your cable throttle bodies. Now, this is a 4-bolt LS. I don't think I've mentioned that. So this will take any of the LS3 style of throttle bodies that you will find on cars and trucks of many of the LS offerings. And overall, very happy with this intake manifold, and I'm excited to get this thing into the car and get this thing tested. All right, guys, so that's going to wrap it up for today's video. There's a few more problems that we're going to have to solve with this engine, but that's hot rodding for you. I'm super excited to get this into the car and onto the dyno, and in the next episode, we're going to handle the transmission adapting to a Turbo 400, as well as get this installed into the car. And we're also going to reveal what we're going to put this engine into. And I gotta say, I'm super excited to share it with you guys. So if you enjoyed today's video, leave a comment down below of what your impressions of this engine are. Do you think this will be a serious contender as an alternative to the Junkyard Turbo LS? Leave your comments down below. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video with a friend. Go buy a t-shirt. Links are in the description. And we will see you in the next one.